welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me or who've never been here before, I'm Rachel, the owner of the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Happy Tuesday. I hope you had a great weekend. I know mine was pretty laid back for the most part. Sunday we stayed home. I figured I have enough stuff in my stash in my kitchen right now that I really didn't need to add a bunch to it. Plus it was playoffs, and so my husband wanted to stay home and watch football, which is completely understandable, so we did. And so yesterday I ran some errands, and I did do a little bit of thrift store shopping, ran to a couple that I normally don't get to, bought a few things, nothing too major though. So I'm really not sure at this point what I'm going to do for Thursday's video. I think I might start on that little chair that I got last week, so we'll see. But anyway, today's video is a little bit DIY and a little bit thrift flip. So it should be interesting. It's kind of a mixed bag, and I hope you really like it. And if you want to kind of follow along and watch behind the scenes here at the cottage and see what I'm up to in my kitchen, please subscribe to my channel and then hit the little notification bell, and that will tell you when I do upload new content. For right now, it's Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesdays is usually some sort of a flip video or a DIY, trash to treasure, that kind of thing. And then normally Thursday, I try and do my thrift haul, unless I don't do a thrift haul, and then I kind of improvise a little. And as we get closer to seed starting and spring and all that, there might be some added content having to do with my flower farm or my nursery here at the cottage. So we'll just have to see as we go along. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and without further ado, here are those projects. For project one, I like making these little wood block signs, and they are pretty inexpensive to make, just using 2x4s. And here I have a couple scraps that we had laying around at home, and then I'd actually bought one at Home Depot, I think. And so I start off by measuring out 4, 5, and 6 inch increments on each board, trying to use up as much as I possibly can of each piece of wood, because you know you don't want to waste too much. The only thing here is, as I'm doing this, I am not paying attention to how many of each one I am marking. I was just kind of doing it randomly. I really should have put a little bit more thought into how many of each size I needed, but it is what it is. So next step is taking my chop saw outside and getting it all plugged in, and then cutting each one of those boards at all the little marks that I had put on them. So just trying to be careful to go right on the line, so I'm as close to 4, 5, and 6 inches as possible. You can see my little pile mounting up there. And then next is sanding each one of these blocks. I did not record very much of this. It's the most time-consuming process of all of it. I told my husband I desperately need a tabletop belt sander for this, so hopefully someday. But for now, I got to spend the bulk of my day going out, sanding until my fingers were numb, and then going in and warming my hands up, and then going back out and sanding some more. Finally, I got all the blocks ready for paint, and that is the next step. So I'm using the Cottage color by DIY. It's vintage white. It's a beautiful color, and the wonderful thing about this particular paint is that the sealer is mixed in. So once I put 2 coats on each block, sides, top, bottom, front, back, everything, I was done. I didn't have to go back and seal it. As you can see, I painted most of them white, and then I went in and painted enough to make 2 of the signs in vintage pink. Here I am putting the second coat around the sides and 1 coat on top, and then I go over the top with a second coat, and there they are, all done, ready for the next step, which is taking some pieces of, it's basically cardstock that's got really pretty designs for Valentine's Day, and choosing which pattern I want to go on each block, and then cutting the paper out to size and getting them all set up and ready to be decoupaged on. So the next step is Mod Podging these on, and I use a mixture of about a quarter water and a 3/4 Mod Podge just to water it down a touch. And I put a really good even coat of the Mod Podge mixture on each block. And I find that the key to this is making sure that your sides and your corners are really well seated down into that Mod Podge. So I run my fingers along the edges, I poke the corners down until I feel like everything is pretty well stuck. The only thing to watch for is to make sure as your fingers get a little sticky from the Mod Podge that you're not accidentally ripping your paper. So I got up a couple times and rinsed my fingers off during this process just to get that extra Mod Podge off. And I do let them sit and dry in between coats. So once they're dry, I go back over them with that second coat of Mod Podge just to make sure everything is nicely sealed and ready for the next step, which is the letter. So I printed these letters on my Cricut. They are printed on permanent vinyl. And I just picked a font that I liked and made them so that each letter would fit onto its appropriate block. And then printed them out on my Cricut, weeded them, and got them all ready to go on. So here I am. I just take each letter and center it the best I can on the block, and then push it down, and then peel that transfer tape back. And that's all there is to that part. So pretty simple. Once the letters are all down, you've got XOXO. I will take each set, so you can see I've done love and 2 of the XOs, and I'm going to take each small O, well, the first small O in each set, and I'm going to put a little ribbon around it and then add some bling just to kind of pretty these up and make them a little cuter for Valentine's Day. So here I am tying some ribbon. I don't know what kind of ribbon it is. It's just kind of an opaque white ribbon that I have here in my kitchen. And so I cut the tails off, and I'm going to add a little piece of bling to the center. Now the bling that I have are brooches that I found on Amazon. So I have to cut the pin off the back. And then I just use hot glue and glue it down to the center. And I did that for all of those first small letters in each set. And I did go back and glue the ribbon down, but I think they turned out great. For project 2, I grabbed some salvaged wood out of my stash from an old dresser that I wasn't able to save, but I took it apart and I used all the bits and pieces of it to make signs. And I painted one with white linen by DIY, it's one of their Cottage colors, and 2 with vintage pink. The thing I love about this particular paint is the sealer's built in, so I don't have to go back over it with anything extra. Just once it's painted, it's done. I did paint the back of both of the pink signs, but I did not have enough of the white to do the back, so I just cleaned up the back of the white sign really well and made it look pretty. Now I decided I wanted to add a little bit something special on each one of these signs, and so I'm using transfers for that. And the 2 pink signs are getting little pieces that I had left over of Midnight Floral, which is a Redesign by Prima transfer. And the top white one is getting a piece of Painted Floral by Redesign by Prima. So you can see it's an easy process. You just put the transfer where you want it. You rub it on with the transfer stick as you peel the vellum piece back. And once they're on, just kind of rub over them with your fingers and make sure they're well seated onto your piece. You can also burnish them with the piece of vellum that came off of the transfer itself. Next up is the stencil, and I printed the stencil. I found this really cute font that I liked. It's called Heart Love. If you want it, you can find it at Da Font online. And so I made one sign that says kiss me, one sign that says you and me, and one sign that says be mine. So here I am just centering the stencil onto my piece. And once I get it where I want it, I'll push it down and then peel that transfer tape back. And then I'll begin to actually stencil. And I use Little Black Dress by DIY and a makeup sponge, pretty simple. And just kind of pounce the paint into the stencil. And then I peel the stencil back, and you'll see kind of on these pieces with the finish that they have on them, when you peel the stencil back, it takes little bits of the paint off. But I really like the look of it, so I always just leave it. And then I go back through and weed out the little pieces, and then the signs are done. I think they turned out super cute. For project 3, I have had this wooden heart in my stash for probably a good year and a half. So I finally decided it was time to do something with it. And so first step, I am painting it front and back with Kissing Booth by DIY. It's a very pretty kind of magenta pink. And so giving it just 2 coats of paint. And then I decided the paint brush strokes were a little much for me. So I decided to go over and pounce the paint on it with my flat brush. And I decided to add just a little bit of, I believe it's called Petticoat Pink by DIY, and just kind of blend the two around in kind of a, like I said, I just pounce it on until it's nice and covered. And I like the look of this a lot better than just the plain Kissing Booth by itself. Trying to get all the pieces covered. Once it's dry, I go back over it with a damp shop towel and do a little bit of distressing just to bring back some of that really beautiful dark wood. Once that's finished, I coat it with a nice coat of Big Top and get that all done front and back. And then I decided it was kind of plain, so I am going to build it a ribbon. And so I've cut some pieces of lace and some pieces of flower sackcloth, half of which are dyed with coffee, and the other half of which are dyed with, I put them in a tub with a little bit of a pink acrylic paint and water mixed together, and just kind of doused them in that and then let them dry and cut them into strips. So it's kind of like building a lasagna. I usually put lace and then flower sackcloth and then a different color, and then I rotate back through until I've got the right combo. And then I took a piece of the pink flower sackcloth that I kind of ripped off really thin and tied the ribbon nice and tight right in the middle so I could use that tail to tie it to the heart itself. So then I tie it on. And then I kind of fuss with it a little just to make sure it's all nice and straight. And I did cut the tails off the back of the heart, and then I glued it down just to keep it where I wanted it. And again, I'm using one of the blingy brooches that I got on Amazon, cutting off the back and just gluing that to the center. I think this turned out super cute as well. For my fourth and final project for today, I had this beautiful jar that I found on my last thrift run, and I knew I wanted to paint it, so I decided what the heck, I would use it for one of my Valentine's Day projects. So here I am giving it a good coat of Petticoat Pink by DIY, and then going over it with my brush to pounce the paint on. As you know, if you've watched my videos, I really prefer this texture opposed to paint brush strokes on my pieces if I can help it. And so here I am pouncing the second coat on. And I did have to go over it in a couple spots with a third coat just to make sure it had a really good coverage. And then I am taking, this is where kind of the magic happens, taking my wet shop towel and, well, damp, it's a damp shop towel, and rubbing some of that paint back off of the details and kind of giving it a couple spots where it looks kind of aged and worn. And then the final step here is using Big Top to coat it. The thing with DIY paint is it can be reactivated with water, so you really do need to seal it, and Big Top is great for pieces like this. Now again, I decided needed some ribbon, and I love lace, so I'm using the same kind of technique I did for the last piece. Kind of a lasagna ribbon, and so building it up, just kind of laying each piece on top of each other, lace, and then the coffee stained, and then the pink stained, and then a coffee stained, and then a pink stained, and then lace again, just to make that ribbon, and then using a thinner strip of the pink just so that I have something to tie it onto the jar with. And then in this one, I'm going to use some really thin jute and make it more of a tassel. So right underneath the top of it, I'm just tying this really tight, and you doing a double knot and then trimming off the excess jute so that you can't see it. And then that'll be the back of the ribbon when I tie it to the jar. Just cutting off the little jute tails. And then I tested this to make sure, and the flour sack cloth was just long enough to go around the jar twice and then tie it in a knot close to the little tassel, as close as I could, and then doing a double knot, cutting off the ends, and then just kind of moving the tassel back over the knot so you can't see it. And then just kind of straighten it out. And then this one's getting a piece of bling. I found a brooch that almost exactly matches the flower. I was super excited. So just cutting off that pin off the back, a little bit of hot glue, and then I'm going to stick it where it belongs. And then that one's done. So what did you guys think of my 4 projects for this week's video? I hope you liked them. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'd love to hear which one was your favorite, and so comment below and let me know. I think for me, honestly, the jar. I think the jar was probably my favorite. It was the simplest of all the projects. I think it came together super cute, and I just really liked it. My least favorite part of all of it was having to sand all those individual wooden blocks, but I like to make sure that the corners are nice and rounded and there aren't any splinters, so it's definitely time consuming. And it didn't help that it was cold outside, so I kept having to go out until my fingers were cold and come in and wait for them to warm up and back out and in. So it took almost the whole day just to get those guys all sanded and ready for paint. So I told my husband for my birthday, I think I really would like a tabletop belt sander. I think that would make that process a whole heck of a lot simpler. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, hit the little notification bell, and that will tell you when I upload new content. And I'll see you back here on Thursday. I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing for Thursday's video, but I will come up with something, and I hope to see you then. Have a great rest of your week.